So I want to start off with putting an image in your mind. I want you to think about either being at a county fair or perhaps in an arcade room. And there's a machine with plexiglass around it, and there's this kind of mountain of trinkets. And then there's a claw. It's called the claw, the machine. And you put your coin in, and there's a little joystick, and that claw begins to come down, and you try and get the exact thing that you want in that mountain of things. Many a child, and perhaps an adult as well, has cried that they could not get the thing they wanted with the claw. And I did look it up, and yes, it's usually rigged. But that's kind of a metaphor for our society. The mountain of things, and there's something that we want. I mean, just think about something as easy, as simple as ordering a sandwich these days. I'd like a sandwich. What kind of bread would you like? Whole wheat, seeded, white, rye. I'll have rye. Marble rye or just regular rye? Brioche. And gluten-free. And then cheese, would you like cheese? Yes, thank you. Cheddar, white or yellow? Swiss, provolone, pepper jack. Would you like mayo, mustard, or aioli? Oh, I'd love some aioli. Do you want sriracha aioli, garlic aioli, lemon aioli, or regular aioli? Right? We are so accustomed to getting exactly what we want. My daughter goes to Starbucks all the time, and her litany, it's like a mantra. Venti, vanilla bean, frappuccino, extra drizzle, no whip. Do you know that there are 87,000 combinations of drinks that you can get at Starbucks? That's what Google said, anyway. And then there's the algorithms. And none of us are immune to this. In fact, just this morning, Jorge was here, and somebody had a nice cup of coffee from Phil's. And Jorge said, "That's what I need." And I said, "Well, there's coffee in the nursery room that's made." "Well, is it that coffee?" Because I don't want it if it's not that coffee. And then there's the online algorithms, right? You look at something online and something that you might want, and then this algorithm reminds you that you want it. Whether you're trying to read a New York Times article or listen to some music, that same thing that you wanted just popped up as an ad. I'm talking this fall about reimagining our lives, rebuilding community, and we are just beginning to acknowledge the grief and the losses that have happened in this pandemic. And like I said last week, we have no idea of the ripple effect of the pandemic yet. What we do know is the stark reality that 1 in 500 Americans has died from COVID. And in the recent months, the unnecessary loss of so many unvaccinated. Losses and deaths that could have been preventable. And now the religious community's all up in it as well. Now that there's more vaccine mandates, there's a religious exception. So among some of my clergy colleagues, people are saying that they're getting letters from people that if they write them a religious exemption letter, they will make a donation to the church. Whoops. There's a lot of anger and around things like that. There's a lot of fear. The accelerating climate change that even is beyond some of the most dire predictions from our scientists. And today I want to talk a little bit about restoration and healing. On the altar you'll see some tools and things for restoring. And when you think of restoration, you think of restoring an old piece of furniture to bring it back to its original beauty. I think of that as healing, restoring us to our original state, not the pre-pandemic state, but our original state, as in our original blessing that we are born into this world with, where we belong, where we are seen, where we are beloved. And restoring ourselves is returning to that place, that sense. And I think the text that Jorge read for us today gives us some insights into that healing process of being restored. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple. Now, remember, they had just come through a devastating time themselves. They had lost their teacher. They were still in the midst of their grief, but they maintained their practice of going to the temple to pray. Because, friends, whatever your spiritual practice is, whether it's praying or meditating or walking or reading poetry, the busier you become, the more despair you feel, that's the most important time to stay grounded in your spiritual practice, whatever it is. I always tell people, come to church when you least feel like it, because that's when we need it the most. At the same time Peter and John were going up to the temple to pray, a man was being carried in, lame from birth. Now remember, they didn't have wheelchairs. They didn't have disability benefits. They didn't have a safety net in any way. People in the community cared for him, taking turns to bring him and lay him at the beautiful gate, the gate called Beautiful, the entrance to the city of Old Jerusalem. I can imagine that, having been in Jerusalem. I can imagine that gate, the huge arch made of that distinct and shining Jerusalem stone. And the man was asking for alms. Now, the giving and receiving of alms was a practice, a spiritual practice as important as the practice of prayer. There was no distinction. In fact, in Islam, it's one of the 5 pillars: profession of faith, the 5 times daily prayer, the giving of alms, fasting, and pilgrimage. In Judaism, it's called tzedakah. In fact, there was a concept that wealth is a loan from God. Wealth is a loan from God, and the poor have a certain claim on the possessions of the rich, and the rich are enjoined to share with the poor as an act of faith, as an act of gratitude. It's one of the reasons we give away our plate offering every week. In a sense, it's a giving of alms, a spiritual practice. The man saw Peter and James and asked them for alms, and Peter looked intently at him. Maybe it was in that moment that they saw in him the face of their teacher, the face of the one who suffered, the face of the one who they left in agony. They looked intently at him, and they had already given him a gift, the gift of being seen. And they saw him with intention, and then they said to him, "Look at us." As if to say, raise your head. There's no shame. Raise your head, you are worthy. And the man looked up expectantly, probably waiting to hear the clinking of the coins dropping in the cup. But instead he heard these words, "I have no gold or silver, but what I have, I give you." Peter and John shared their very life-giving spirit that they had received. That same resilience that raised Jesus up was with them, and they took the man's hand, helped him stand, and he began to walk. And then he leapt, praising God. Now, this story that's come across to us over the millennia, a story of healing at the beautiful gate. In our 21st century minds, we have no idea what really took place. But something happened. Could it be that the man's sense of being seen, perhaps for one of the first times in his life, ignited something in him that he had not thought possible before? But usually healing does not come so suddenly or dramatically. You know, we used to have healing services at my last church every month. Healing for mind, body, soul, and spirit. And I'll tell you the truth. There'd be a line out the door. That's the truth. And you know what? I saw some miracles. I really did. But most of the time, people, it's not about being cured. It's about being whole. And I saw people feel a sense of wholeness. Wholeness, that deep sense of well-being, regardless of what is swirling around you. And I think that part of that wholeness, that restoration to wholeness, comes when we receive the gifts that are given to us, maybe not the ones we expect or even want, but when we're open to receiving. So today, simply, I want to invite us to look at our capacity to receive. Not take. We're pretty good at taking. We're pretty good at manipulating that metaphorical claw and getting exactly what we want. But the gift of receiving. Because after all, if we believe we are interdependent, and I think we do, we cannot be whole unless we are willing to receive from one another. I've come to see this as one of the keys to healing, to wholeness. Rather than focusing on my wants or my entitlements, to receive the gifts people give, whatever they are. The American dream we associate with getting what we want with success and not getting what we want as failure. But that is not the Jesus way. Mark Nepo, the author and poet and deeply spiritual man, says, what we want and what we're given often serve two different gods. How we respond to their meeting determines our path. The unexpected gifts and being open to those. I had what you would think maybe is a trivial moment of that this week. Early in the week, I was riding my bike to church. Our daughter's got her license, so she's using my car to go back and forth to school. And so I was happy to do it, but I was a little bit discombobulated that morning, trying to, get the right shoes on and my reflecting jacket and put everything in my panniers, and it was taking more time than just getting in my car. But I got on my bike and I started to come down B Street. And for those of you that are not local, B Street is a local street with a lot of restaurants, just a couple blocks from the church. And I was riding my bike. It was a beautiful day. The breeze was blowing. The sun was out. And I just started to feel this immense joy. As I got to B Street, with the streets closed off, it's so fun to ride with no cars there. These waves of aromas from the restaurants just almost overwhelmed me. I found myself almost emotional because here I was just receiving that gift in the moment. I felt whole. I thought, I have my health to ride my bike. I live in a beautiful place where I can enjoy these aromas from Phil's coffee, to Pacific Catch preparing the food for the day, to all the El Salvadorian and Mexican restaurants. By the time I got to church, I felt whole. An unexpected gift. And it may sound small, but sometimes the smallest gifts are the greatest gifts. If we could put aside what we want sometimes and receive what is given, that would help restore us. Just as we were given that original blessing and came into this world whole, we can touch that place more often than not, simply by receiving the gifts that we're given. So as Chase said, even the night gives us a kind of light, and we adjust little by little to what the night has to give us enough to see by, as long as we are easily satisfied. And the thermal under the hawk's wings is enough, provided the hawk cooperates by dipping this way and that and letting go of its own plans. The baby's gaze and the passing stroller, the gentle lift of a dog's paw, and the librarian who walks you to the stack without judgment are plenty in themselves if we let go of what we think we are hungry for. I may not have gold or silver, Peter said, but I will give you what I have. And despite our expectations of something more or something different, we are fed, we can see, we can walk. And I would add, we can be whole. Amen.